My wife called me at work just before noon. Her voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't emotional. It was sharp. Controlled. "I just inherited $600 million, she said. "Pack your things and move out of the apartment." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her. "My name is Eliseo. I'm 49 years old. And 47 days ago, my 18-year marriage ended in less than 5 minutes. I'm a civil engineer. For nearly 2 decades, my life followed the same rhythm. Leave home before sunrise, return after dark. I reviewed plans, supervised projects, signed off on inspections. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. Stable. Predictable. And I believed stability was enough. My wife, Nyla, worked in human resources. Between the two of us, we lived comfortably. Not wealthy, not struggling. A modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. One decent car. A vacation once a year. Bills paid on time. No drama. At least, that's what I thought. About 3 years ago, something in her shifted. She became fascinated with luxury influencers and millionaire lifestyles online, private jets, designer brands, penthouses overlooking Dubai skylines. She spent hours scrolling through curated perfection. Slowly, I began to notice the way she looked at me. Not with anger. With disappointment. She never argued. Never accused. She simply withdrew. Short answers. Late nights on her phone. Her back turned to me in bed. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd say she was just tired. I wanted to believe her. There was one person in our lives she openly disliked, her Aunt Melissa. A 78-year-old woman who lived alone in an aging house on the edge of the city. The family described her as eccentric. Difficult. Odd. Nyla called her a failure. I met Melissa once at a family gathering years ago. She didn't strike me as strange, just sharp. Observant. The kind of person who saw through people quickly. Over time, I began visiting her on Sundays. It wasn't planned. I just stopped by one afternoon, and it became routine. Tea. Conversations about architecture, history, business. I fixed small things around her house. She told stories about investments she had quietly managed in decades when women weren't expected to manage anything. Nyla never asked where I went on Sundays. So I never explained. 4 months ago, Melissa called me late at night. She wasn't feeling well. I took her to the hospital. Her heart was failing. She accepted it calmly. 2 weeks before she passed, she handed me a small wooden box. "Open it after I'm gone," she said. "Trust me." I placed it in my office cabinet and didn't think much of it. She died on a Thursday morning. I was there. Nyla never visited her once. The funeral was small. Quiet. When we left, Nyla checked her phone and said, "At least that chapter is closed." Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. At 11 a.m. Nyla called me to her office urgently. I drove there with 1,000 worries in my head, an accident, illness, legal trouble. When I walked into her office, she looked different. Perfectly dressed. Impeccable makeup. Smiling, but not warmly. Confident. Victorious. She told me her aunt's lawyer had called that morning. Melissa, it turned out, wasn't a lonely old woman sitting on forgotten property. She had assets. Investments. Shares in companies no one knew about. And Nyla had inherited all of it. $600 million. For a brief moment, I felt happy. Genuinely happy. I thought our lives had just transformed. That we could build something bigger together. "Our lives just changed," I said. She corrected me instantly. "My life," she said. Then she slid a stack of papers across the desk. Separation documents. Already prepared. Already dated 2 days earlier. She had planned this. Calmly, she explained she'd felt trapped for years. That our life was small. Predictable. That I was responsible, but uninspiring. That she deserved more than routine dinners and early mornings. The inheritance, she said, was her liberation. 18 years summarized in a boardroom tone. When I got home that afternoon, my belongings were already separated. My documents were stacked neatly on the table. The only thing missing was my signature. I read every page carefully. Then I signed. No shouting. No pleading. No scene. She stood by the window watching me. When I finished, I looked at her and said quietly, "Enjoy your new fortune, Nyla." She laughed. Laughed like I had just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that the wooden box sitting in my office cabinet had not been forgotten. And that in 47 days, that laugh would cost her everything. She shook her head slowly. "It's not about another man, Ellie. There's no one else. I just don't want this life anymore. I don't want you anymore. You're a good man, but you're small. And I refuse to stay small." The word small lingered in the air between us. I picked up the documents and read them carefully. Division of property. Terms of separation. She was keeping everything except my personal belongings and my car. The apartment had always been legally hers, a wedding gift from her parents. For 18 years, I had paid every bill, every repair, every tax. But legally, it was never mine. She wasn't asking for alimony. She wasn't demanding anything. She simply wanted me gone. There was a clause requiring me to vacate within 24 hours. She watched me as I turned each page. I think she expected resistance, tears, anger, maybe even humiliation. Instead, something inside me went quiet. Not shattered. Quiet. I picked up the pen she had placed neatly beside the papers and signed every page without hesitation. When I finished, I stood, looked at her calmly, and said, "Enjoy your fortune, Nyla. I truly hope it gives you everything you're searching for." She burst into laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not awkward. Triumphant laughter. "Thank you for making this easy," she said. "You've always been predictable." I walked out of her office without looking back. The apartment felt different when I returned. Same furniture. Same walls. Same air. But it no longer felt like home. On the dining table, she had organized my life into a single folder: passport, certificates, car documents. Efficient to the very end. I packed 2 suitcases. Only what was mine. No photographs. No shared memories. No keepsakes. 18 years reduced to fabric and paper. I closed the door behind me and drove without direction until I found a modest roadside hotel. I rented a room for a week. The room was small. A narrow bed. An old television. A window overlooking a parking lot. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt hollow. At dawn, I showered, dressed, and went to work as usual. My boss, Enrique, noticed immediately. I told him the truth in a single sentence: she inherited money and decided she didn't need me anymore. He hugged me awkwardly and offered time off. I refused. Work was easier than silence. Within days, Nyla reinvented herself online. She launched social media accounts everywhere. Curated photos, glamorous captions, designer sunglasses, fine dining, champagne glasses raised to "new beginnings." Strangers celebrated her. Acquaintances applauded her courage. She became a minor celebrity in our city almost overnight. 3 days later, she posted a picture beside a red sports car with the caption, "When you finally break free from what was holding you back." The implication was clear. A week later, she quit her job publicly in a video filmed on the terrace of a luxury hotel. She spoke about freedom, about refusing mediocrity, about chasing abundance. My name was never mentioned. I had been edited out of her story. People sent me screenshots constantly. Co-workers, distant friends, even strangers. I always replied the same way, "Yes, it's true. I wish her well." After a month, she hosted a lavish party at a luxury hotel ballroom. Hundreds attended. Many of them strangers drawn by proximity to wealth. During the celebration, someone asked about her ex-husband. The camera caught her laughing. "He was a good man," she said, lifting her glass. "But he lived a small life. I needed more. Sometimes you have to drop the weight to rise." The crowd cheered. I watched that clip 3 times. By the 3rd time, it didn't even hurt anymore. Meanwhile, I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment. 40 square meters. Basic furniture. A bed, a table, 2 chairs. One framed photograph of a mountain I had visited years ago. That was my reset. Work became my refuge. I arrived early. Stayed late. Took on additional responsibilities. Weekends were the hardest, especially Sundays. Sundays had once belonged to Melissa. And that's when I remembered the wooden box. It was still in my office cabinet. The next morning, I retrieved it. Dust covered the lid. I wiped it clean and took it home. I stared at it for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. Inside were neatly folded documents and a handwritten letter. The letter read, "If you're reading this, I am no longer here. The Sundays you spent with me were the brightest moments of my final years. You treated me like a person when others treated me like an inconvenience. Because of that, I made a decision. Trust me one last time." Underneath the letter were legal papers. I unfolded them slowly. It was a will. Dated 3 months before her death. I read it once. Twice. 3 times. Melissa had revoked her previous will. And named a single beneficiary. Eliseo Marquez. Me. Not Nyla. Not anyone else. Me. Attached were official confirmations from her lawyer, financial statements, property titles, investment summaries. The estimated value wasn't $600 million. It was $640 million. I sat on the floor of my small apartment surrounded by papers I could barely comprehend. The woman who had been mocked, ignored, dismissed, had seen everything clearly. And she had made her choice quietly. At the bottom of the stack, I found another sealed envelope. It was labeled with Nyla's name. And inside were documents Melissa had specifically instructed her lawyer to deliver to Nyla. Inside the envelope labeled with Nyla's name were documents that looked impressive at first glance. Notarized records, stamped papers, decades-old contracts, loan agreements Melissa had once issued to extended family members. But when I read them carefully, I understood the truth. They weren't assets. They were history. Old debts long settled. Records without enforceable value. Paper that looked powerful, but carried no real money behind it. Melissa had never lied. Her lawyer had never lied. They simply handed Nyla exactly what had been left to her, documents. And allowed her ambition to do the rest. Nyla saw official seals. Large numbers. Legal language. And she saw what she wanted to see. $600 million. It was a flawless trap. Legal. Cruel. Brilliant. Melissa knew her niece better than anyone. She knew Nyla would rush. She would celebrate before confirming. Spend before verifying. Build a palace before checking the foundation. And she knew I would eventually open that box. At the bottom of Melissa's letter, one final line stood out. Do not seek revenge. Revenge is already in motion. When this ends, use what I've given you to do something meaningful. Remain the man you have always been. I folded the papers carefully and hid the box in the back of my closet. I told no one. Not Enrique. Not colleagues. Not even the lawyer yet. I waited. Because patience reveals character, and debt reveals truth. Meanwhile, Nyla's online empire expanded. Luxury trips. Designer shopping sprees. 5-star resorts. Motivational captions about courage and abundance. 3 days after I opened the box, she posted photos from Miami, champagne by the ocean, branded shopping bags swinging from her wrists. A week later, she announced she had purchased a penthouse in the most exclusive district of the city, $3 million, she claimed, paid in cash. But it wasn't cash. Public property records told a different story. Massive mortgage. Loans backed by documents the banks believed represented a verified inheritance. The sports car. Financed. The jewelry. Credit. The parties. Borrowed money. Every image of freedom was underwritten by debt. She wasn't rich. She was leveraged. And she had no idea. 3 weeks passed. Her followers grew. Brand partnerships appeared. She hosted extravagant yacht parties. She spoke about independence and escaping mediocrity. Then the silence came. One morning, no post. By afternoon, a shaky video from inside her car. No makeup. Red eyes. Sometimes the universe tests you, she wrote. The banks had called. Investigations had started. Loans required proof. Proof did not exist. Within days, legal notices followed. Fraud allegations. Misrepresentation of assets. Local media caught the story. Headlines were merciless. The same people who once praised her courage now mocked her collapse. Clips resurfaced of her calling me small. Comment sections flooded with the word karma. I didn't feel triumph. Only a heavy sadness. Then came her final public video. Sitting on the bare floor of her penthouse, furniture already removed, she admitted there had been a misunderstanding. She claimed she truly believed the documents represented real wealth. At the end, after a long silence, she looked directly into the camera. Ellie, if you're watching, leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. And then the screen went black. She deleted everything the next day. 2 months of fame vanished overnight. Soon after, her defense attorney began investigating the will. They discovered another beneficiary existed. Me. The confidentiality period expired. My name surfaced. 3 days later, she came to my construction site. I saw her through the fence before she spoke. No glamour. No arrogance. Just exhaustion. Ellie, please, she said softly. I know you inherited everything. I know now. I need your help. I didn't deny it. I told her the truth. I visited your aunt every Sunday for 15 years. I expected nothing. She made her choice on her own. She broke down. She begged me to share the inheritance. To rescue her. To save her from bankruptcy and possible charges. She said blood should matter. She said I was a good man. I reminded her of her own words. You said I was small. You said you needed more. You said I was baggage. She cried harder. I was blinded, she whispered. I answered calmly. You built your future without me in it. Now I'm building mine the same way. Not out of revenge. Not out of cruelty. Just, because it's over. She screamed. Called me heartless. Said I was enjoying her suffering. I'm not enjoying anything, I replied. But I won't protect you from consequences you chose. Then I walked away. The media frenzy intensified when my identity became public. Headlines shifted overnight. Ex-husband she abandoned revealed as true heir. Fortune belonged to the small man all along. Public opinion turned theatrical. Some praised me. Others accused me of manipulation. Everyone had an opinion. I stayed silent. Because Melissa's last instruction echoed louder than the noise. Be the man you've always been. And I intended to honor that. Some people called it poetic justice. Others said I was cold for refusing to help her. Reporters left voicemails. Journalists waited outside my workplace. Strangers debated my character online as if they knew me. I followed Camillo's advice. Silence. No interviews. No statements. No explanations. Enrique guarded the construction site like a fortress. Anyone asking for me was told the same thing. He's not available. And that was true, I wasn't available for spectacle. A week later, Karina, Nyla's cousin, sent me a message. The penthouse had been repossessed. The car taken. The accounts frozen. Nyla had moved back in with her mother in a cramped apartment on the edge of the city. Her mother was furious. The debts were enormous. The shame was worse. She doesn't leave her room, Karina wrote. Isn't there anything you can do? I answered honestly. Compassion doesn't mean rescuing someone from the consequences of their choices. If I save her now, I teach her nothing. Karina didn't reply. The legal process dragged on. Her attorney tried every argument. Deception, manipulation, influence. But Camillo had documentation for everything. Medical records. Recorded statements. Witnesses. Melissa had acted with complete clarity. 2 months later, Nyla accepted a plea. Not intentional fraud, but reckless financial misconduct. 2 years probation. 500 hours of community service. Full repayment of over $3 million in debt. The headlines were loud. I felt nothing but exhaustion. There were no winners. Just consequences. 3 months after sentencing, I finally faced the inheritance. I was still living in a modest apartment. Still driving my old car. Still working full-time. The fortune existed only on paper in a wooden box inside my closet. Camillo explained my options. Retire immediately. Travel the world. Buy whatever I wanted. But when he spoke, I didn't see mansions. I saw Melissa. Her quiet house. Her careful tea rituals. The dignity she preserved despite her wealth. And I knew what I wanted. A foundation. For elderly people forgotten by their families. Places where they would be seen. Heard. Cared for. We created the Melissa Contras Foundation with a $200 million endowment. The rest went into stable investments to sustain the mission long-term. 6 months later, the first center opened. Casa Melissa. 50 residents. It filled in a week. I saw an 80-year-old woman cry because someone remembered she liked chamomile tea. I saw a retired teacher play chess again after 10 lonely years. Every Sunday, I visited. Not as a benefactor. Just as Ellie. The foundation grew. 2 centers. 5. 12. Hundreds of seniors cared for with dignity. When media asked for interviews, I accepted only on one condition. Don't talk about drama. Talk about the work. Once, a journalist asked what I had learned. I said. Money doesn't change character. It reveals it. If you're generous, you become more generous. If you're selfish, you become more selfish. That answer spread further than I expected. 2 years after the divorce, I received an email. From Nyla. She had gone to therapy. Worked entry-level jobs. Lost almost everyone. She didn't ask for money. She only said she was sorry. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. But because some doors close quietly and should remain closed.